Ambassador Jinho Park walked slowly through the massive crystal halls of the Galactic Council building on Nexus Prime. Her black diplomatic uniform stood out against the colorful robes and strange forms of the other species around her. She had been coming here for 3 years now, but the sight of so many different alien beings still amazed her. The main council chamber was huge. It could hold thousands of delegates from 47 different worlds. Some looked like walking trees with golden leaves. Others were made of living crystal that sparkled in the light. The Sethri delegates floated in special water tanks, their tentacles moving gracefully as they spoke in musical voices. Jinho sat in the human section with her assistant, Min-Ji Kim. They both looked small compared to the giant insect-like Vorthak delegates or the floating energy beings from the Lumino system. Humans were still the newest members of this ancient council, and everyone knew it. The meeting today was about trade routes through the Andorian sector. The crystal beings called Altarians wanted to study the proposal for another month. The fish-like Sethri suggested forming a committee to examine the cultural impact. Even the warrior species called Kronari, who used to be fierce fighters, now preferred talking to fighting. They want another delay, Min-Ji whispered to Jinho. The Altarians think we're moving too fast. Jinho nodded but said nothing. In her diplomatic bag, she carried reports that would change everything. Human deep space stations had detected something terrible in the dark regions of space. Huge fleets were moving toward inhabited worlds. But every time she tried to warn the council, they smiled and told her not to worry so much. The Kronari delegate, War Prime Thundering Blade, stood up to speak. His people used to be great warriors thousands of years ago, but now they only fought in sporting games. His armor was beautiful but useless in real combat. "Honored friends," he said in a deep voice, "we must remember that hasty decisions lead to regret. Perhaps we should send a cultural exchange team to these traders who have appeared in the outer regions. All beings can find common ground through patient discussion." More aliens nodded in agreement. They loved to talk and study and form committees. Jinho had learned to respect their wisdom and patience. These species had created a peaceful galaxy where wars were almost unknown. They had art and philosophy that made human culture look primitive, but they had also forgotten how to fight. The Sethri ambassador, whose name meant something like gentle flowing water, moved gracefully in her tank. "Violence is a tool of the uncivilized," she sang in her musical voice. "We have evolved beyond such crude solutions. Every problem can be solved through understanding." Jinho felt sick. The reports in her bag told a different story. The things moving through space were not traders or explorers. They were the devourers, creatures that ate entire worlds. 300 years ago, they had almost destroyed the galaxy before mysteriously disappearing. Now they were back. She had tried to explain this in smaller meetings, but the other species just patted her shoulder and told her that humans were still learning to be civilized. They thought her warnings came from humanity's violent past, not from real danger. A small creature that looked like a floating jellyfish called for attention. The human delegation seems troubled by something. Perhaps Ambassador Park would share her concerns with the council? Jinho stood up slowly. Around her, dozens of alien eyes watched with friendly curiosity. These beings had become like family to her. She genuinely loved their commitment to peace and their faith that all problems could be solved without violence. But love would not save them from what was coming. "Thank you, Counselor," she said politely. "Humanity is grateful for your continued guidance. We have much to learn about your peaceful ways." It was the same thing she always said. The alien smiled and nodded, pleased that the young human species was learning proper civilization. They had no idea that human ships were already moving into position around their worlds, or that weapons were being prepared for a war they couldn't imagine. As the meeting continued with more discussions about trade and culture exchanges, Jinho received a quiet message on her communicator. Admiral Taewon Choi, disguised as a human trade representative, sent her a simple code. It meant the hidden human fleets were ready and time was running out. The Devourers would reach the first inhabited worlds in weeks, not the years the Council believed they had for diplomatic solutions. Soon, Jinho would have a stand in the same chamber and speak words that would end the galaxy's age of innocence forever. She looked around at the peaceful aliens debating the proper way to approach unknown species with gifts and friendship. Tomorrow, they would learn that sometimes civilization itself must take up arms to survive. The beautiful, terrible truth was that their peaceful galaxy existed only because someone else was willing to pay the price in blood to defend it. Soon, everyone would know exactly who that someone was. Jean-Ho closed her eyes and prepared for the storm that was coming. In a few days, she would have to break the hearts of beings she loved in order to save their lives. Jean-Ho Park sat alone in her small room on the human diplomatic ship. Through the thick window, she could see the stars scattered across the darkness like tiny diamonds. The ship looked simple from the outside, but it was full of secret equipment that let humans watch what happened all across the galaxy. Commander So-Young Lee knocked softly and entered, carrying a sealed data tablet. Her face looked worried and tired. "The new reports from the edge of space," she said, placing the device on Jean-Ho's desk. "It's getting worse." Jean-Ho turned on the tablet and began reading. The numbers made her stomach feel sick. Massive ships were moving through the dark regions of space. Ships that were grown like plants instead of built like normal vessels. The Devourers were coming, and they wanted to eat every living thing in the galaxy. "How much time do we have?" Jean-Ho asked, even though she was afraid of the answer. "Admiral Choi thinks maybe 3 weeks before they attack the first planets. 6 weeks before they reach the important worlds with billions of people." So-Young paused. "The Council's military experts think they have 2 years to prepare for peaceful talks." Jean-Ho laughed, but it was not a happy sound. The other species in the galaxy could not understand what was really happening, because they had never learned to think like fighters. Their worlds were safe and peaceful. They had plenty of food and water, and never had to fight wars to survive. Earth was different. Humans grew up on a planet where everything tried to kill them. Earthquakes, storms, droughts, and diseases made life hard. Different human groups fought each other for resources. Children learned about war from their grandparents' stories. This violent past made other species think humans were primitive, but also taught humans to see dangers that others missed. She opened another file on the tablet. It showed what the military forces of other species could do. The crystal people called Altarians had no weapons at all. They could not even understand the idea of hurting another being. The fish-like Sethri had ships, but they were only used for exploring space and rescuing people in trouble. Even the supposedly tough Kronari had turned their fighting skills into sports and ceremonies. "What about our Phoenix Protocol?" Jean-Ho asked. So-Young's face became even more serious. "All the secret shipyards are working. Our hidden fleets are positioned around the major worlds. Admiral Choi says everything is ready, but..." She stopped talking for a moment. "Jean-Ho, when the Council learns what we've been building in secret, some of them will think we betrayed them." Jean-Ho closed her eyes and remembered stories her grandmother told about the old wars on Earth. Times when everything good in the world was in danger, and ordinary people had to do terrible things to protect what they loved. The peaceful aliens thought such stories were about savage primitives, but they did not understand that sometimes the greatest act of love was being willing to become a monster so others could stay innocent. "Show me the old records about the Devourers," she said quietly. A hologram appeared above her desk, showing images from 300 years ago. Most species remember the last Devourer attack as old stories and myths, like fairy tales told to children. Only humans had studied these records like they were military training materials, learning from every mistake and every small victory. The images showed worlds stripped bare of all life, entire star systems where nothing green or breathing remained. Billions of beings turned into soup to feed the Devourers' endless hunger. The footage showed the desperate final battles of civilizations that kept trying to negotiate even as they were being eaten alive. "The Council will hate us for what we're about to do," Jean-Ho whispered. "Maybe," So-Young replied. "But their children will be alive to hate us, and that's better than the alternative." Jean-Ho nodded and felt something hard and cold settle in her chest. In 2 days, she would stand before all the species of the galaxy and say words that would change everything. She would transform humanity from helpful junior partners into the galaxy's unwanted guardians. The responsibility felt heavier than a mountain. Every human ship captain, every soldier, Every person who would die in the coming war was depending on her to make the right choice. But there was no right choice, only necessary ones. She thought about the gentle Sethri with their beautiful songs, the wise Altarians with their crystal bodies that caught light like rainbows, even the proud Kronari who had found a way to be warriors without hurting anyone. She loved them all, and that love was exactly why she had to do something they would never forgive. Tomorrow, she would stand in their great council chamber and speak words that would end their innocent dreams forever. She would tell them that their beautiful, peaceful galaxy was built on a foundation of human willingness to become the monsters that others could not be. Someone had to carry the weight of violence, so others could stay clean. Someone had to make the hard choices that kept civilization alive. That someone was humanity, whether they wanted the job or not. Jinho looked out at the stars one more time, knowing that after tomorrow, nothing would ever be the same. The emergency meeting of the Galactic Council was chaos. Representatives from dozens of different species filled the great crystal chamber, their voices mixing together in panic and confusion. Reports kept coming in from the edge of space about terrible things happening to peaceful colonies. Ambassador Jinho Park walked into the chamber and saw fear in alien eyes for the first time in 3 years. The beautiful crystal beings called Altarians were flashing bright colors of distress. The fish-like Sethri were swimming frantically in their water tanks. Even the proud warrior species called Kronari looked shaken. The research station called Deep Current Flowing had gone silent. The last message from the 40,000 scientists there was broken and terrifying. They spoke of dark ships appearing from nowhere and dissolving everything into liquid soup. Then nothing. Council Prime Resonance of Harmony, who looked like a cluster of floating musical instruments, called for quiet. Friends, we gather to discuss the sad loss of contact with our research station. Early reports suggest. Pirates, interrupted War Prime Thundering Blade, his ceremonial armor gleaming under the lights. Criminals from the lawless regions, perhaps angry about trade disputes. The Kronari will send ships to investigate with proper caution. Murmurs of agreement filled the chamber. Even faced with evidence of complete destruction, the council members still wanted to believe this was something they could handle with their usual peaceful methods. Commander So-Young Lee, sitting in the human observation area, caught Jinho's eye and touched her communication device. The signal was small, but Jinho understood its meaning. 3 more groups of enemy ships were moving toward populated worlds. This was not random attack. It was planned warfare designed to destroy the galaxy's ability to fight back. "If I may speak," said Ambassador Flowing Current of Deep Waters, her musical voice carrying across the chamber. "Perhaps we should try to establish communication with these beings. They may simply be trying to talk to us in ways we don't understand. A cultural exchange mission could." They turned 40,000 living beings into biological soup. Jinho's voice cut through the chamber like a sharp knife. The entire assembly went quiet, shocked by her words and her tone. There were no survivors, no prisoners, no attempt to communicate. The station's computers recorded complete consumption of all organic matter before they were destroyed too. War Prime Thundering Blade shifted uncomfortably in his decorative armor. "Ambassador Park, while we value humanity's perspective, there are proper procedures to follow. Honor demands that we offer these beings a chance to explain their actions, to make up for what was surely a misunderstanding." Jinho stood up slowly, feeling the weight of history settling on her shoulders like a heavy coat. For 3 years, she had played the role of a respectful student, learning from species whose wisdom came from thousands of years of peaceful evolution. She had truly come to love many of these beings and respect their commitment to solving problems without violence. But respect would not stop the darkness approaching their worlds. "Honored council members," she began, her voice reaching every corner of the vast chamber. "For 3 years, I have learned from your wisdom, your patience, your complete commitment to peace. You have shown humanity what we could become, what we have always fought to protect." The chamber stayed quiet, but she could sense they expected another human request for understanding, another plea for them to take the threat seriously. "You have built a civilization based on trust, on the belief that all thinking beings can find common ground through talking and mutual respect. It is beautiful and precious, and everything that makes life worth living. Jinho paused, looking across the assembled representatives, beings of crystal and water, energy and flesh, all united in their faith that civilization could overcome any challenge through peaceful means. But the beings approaching our worlds are not rational. They do not want territory or resources or political power. They are not raiders who can be bargained with, or conquerors who can be satisfied with tribute. They're the devourers, and they want only one thing: to consume every living creature in the galaxy. The chamber exploded into shocked voices and angry protests. Several representatives jumped to their feet, calling Jinho's words warmongering and fear-spreading. Jinho raised her voice above the chaos, and something in her tone, the steel that her grandmother's generation had learned in Earth's bloodiest wars, commanded attention. The time for wisdom has passed. The time for patience has ended. The devourers do not want negotiation. They do not accept tribute. They cannot be reasoned with or scared away. Her voice rose, carrying the weight of her species' violent history, the burden of being the only ones who truly understood what was coming. The time for war has come. The words hung in the air like the sound of a funeral bell. In that moment, the galaxy's age of innocence died forever. The beautiful crystal beings dimmed their lights in shock. The musical Scytheries stopped their songs. Even the warrior Chronari sat in stunned silence, unable to process the idea that their ceremonial combat skills might suddenly become necessary for real survival. Jinho stood in the center of the storm she had created, knowing that everything would be different now. The peaceful galaxy these beings had built was about to learn the price of civilization, and exactly who had always been willing to pay it. The Galactic Council Chamber had never seen such chaos. Representatives from dozens of species were shouting at each other, their voices creating a storm of anger, fear, and disbelief. Ambassador Jinho Park stood in the center of it all, calm and unmoving despite the chaos she had created with her words about war. "This is crazy," shouted Elder Crystal Song of Ages, the oldest Altarian delegate. Their crystal body flashed angry red colors. "Humanity speaks of war like it's a good thing instead of the worst failure of civilization." War Prime Thundering Blade stood up from a ceremonial throne, his decorative armor making noise with each movement. Even if these devourers are real threats, there are rules. Honor demands proper challenges, fair fighting, civilized behavior between thinking beings. Jinho watched them with something like sadness. These noble beings, these examples of civilized virtue, still believed that their enemies would follow the same rules, that even destruction could be limited by treaties and controlled by honor codes. "Commander Lee," she said quietly into her communication device, "begin Phoenix Protocol." Suddenly, the chamber's great dome filled with tactical displays as the human delegation activated hidden projection systems. The holographic galaxy map bloomed with energy signatures, showing the true size of the Devourer advance. 17 massive biofleets moving toward inhabited systems in a pattern designed to prevent any coordinated defense. "These are real-time sensor readings," Jinho announced, her voice cutting through the stunned silence. "The Devourer Advance Guard will reach Proxima Colony in 14 days. The main force will arrive at Altair Prime in 28 days. At their current speed, they will consume the core worlds within 6 weeks." Ambassador Flowing Current of Deep Waters raised a shaking tentacle. Surely there must be time for negotiation, for establishing communication. "There is no time," came a new voice from the chamber's upper gallery. Admiral Tawan Choi walked down the stairs with measured steps, his simple civilian clothes now replaced by the black uniform of the Human Defense Force, a military organization that, until this moment, the Council believed was just for ceremonies. "Admiral Choi," Gas Council Prime residents of Harmony, what is the meaning of this disruption? "The meaning, Honored Council Prime, is survival." Taewon activated his personal command interface, and the tactical display changed to show the positions of human military assets throughout the galaxy. "For the past 3 years, while you debated trade routes and cultural exchanges, humanity has been preparing for this day." The display revealed a truth that would destroy the Council's trust forever. Hidden shipyards built inside asteroids, military bases disguised as mining operations, weapon factories pretending to be civilian industries. Most shocking of all were the fleet positions, Sleek human warships appearing from invisibility fields around major council worlds, vessels that have been hiding in plain sight for months. War Prime Thundering Blade stared at the display in horror. "You have been lying to us, building weapons while preaching peace. This violates every treaty, every principle we hold sacred." "Yes," Jinho said simply, "and it is the only reason your people will live to see tomorrow." Admiral Choi gestured, and a holographic display focused on a human fleet near Altair Prime. The ships were unlike anything the Council had seen, angular, predatory, built for function rather than the beautiful designs favored by other species. They were covered with weapon systems designed not for show or limited conflict, but for the complete destruction of enemy forces. The HDF Indomitable and her battle group, Tae-1 announced, armed with fusion torpedoes, quantum disruptors, and kinetic accelerators capable of cracking planet cores. Each ship carries enough firepower to sterilize a continent, and each captain has orders to use every weapon without regard for their own survival. The chamber fell into shocked silence. The concept was alien to species that viewed warfare as something to be conducted with maximum restraint and minimum casualties. Elder Crystal Song of Ages finally spoke, their voice barely a whisper. "You speak of mass killing as if it were normal military procedure, because that's exactly what the Devourers are bringing to our worlds," Jinho replied. "Total war, the complete extermination of all organic life. You can meet that with honor codes and negotiation if you wish, but your people will die with peace treaties in their hands." Admiral Choi activated another display, showing human military doctrine in stark detail. "We have studied every historical record of the last Devourer invasion. We know their tactics, their biology, their weaknesses. Most importantly, we know they can only be stopped by beings willing to sacrifice everything, including their own moral purity, to protect those they love." The truth settled over the assembly like a dark cloud. The peaceful species of the galaxy had built their civilization, assuming that someone else would pay the price for their moral high ground. Now they were learning exactly who that someone was. Council Prime Resonance of Harmony's musical voice carried deep sadness. "And if we refuse your protection?" Jinho met their gaze without fear. "Then you die. All of you. Every man, woman, and child in the galaxy becomes raw material for their endless hunger." She paused. "But we will still fight. Not because you asked us to, or because you deserve it, but because it's who we are." The chamber remained silent as the delegates struggled with a reality that destroyed every assumption they had ever held about civilization, morality, and the price of peace. Outside, human warships prepared for a war that would save the galaxy and damn the species that fought it. 6 months after the Devourer War ended, Ambassador Jinho Park stood once again in the great chamber of the Galactic Council. But everything looked different now. The beautiful crystal walls had black burn marks from emergency repairs. Nearly a quarter of the delegate seats were empty. Entire species had been eaten in the first wave of attacks before human fleets could reach them. The survivors looked changed. The crystal Altarians seemed dimmer, their natural light faded by the weight of what they had seen. The fish-like Sethri wore special scarves to remember the billion aquatic beings who had been dissolved into protein soup on the ocean worlds. Even War Prime Thundering Blade, whose people had remembered how to be real warriors during the desperate defense of Krona 3, bore fresh scars that no amount of ceremonial armor could hide. "The final casualty reports," announced Admiral Tae-1 Choi, his voice rough from months of constant command. The holographic display showed numbers that made the chamber fall silent. 847 million beings lost across 17 star systems, infrastructure damage that would take decades to repair, and environmental destruction on 43 worlds. But they had won. The Devourers were gone, their bio-fleets nothing but floating organic debris in the void. The galaxy was safe, at a price that only humanity had been willing to pay. The human military losses? Asked Elder Crystal Song of Ages, though everyone already knew the answer. 67% of the human defense force. Tae-1 replied. 312 ships lost, often with all hands. The crews of the Indomitable, defiant and relentless, used their vessels as weapons when regular armaments ran out. He paused, his voice thick with emotion. They bought us the time needed to evacuate Sethri Prime. The chamber stayed quiet. The council species had learned, too late, that their peaceful civilization existed only because someone was willing to pay the ultimate price to defend it. Human fighting methods had proven brutally effective against the Devourers, but the costs had been enormous. Entire battle groups sacrificing themselves to save single colonies, using strategies that horrified their allies even as they worked. Commander So-Young Lee, now wearing Admiral's insignia, stepped forward with a sealed document, the Reformed Council Charter, as requested by the member species. Jin-Ho accepted the document, but did not open it. She knew what it contained: a permanent Security Council position for humanity, military command authority during major threats, and a legal framework that would make humanity the galaxy's official guardians, whether they wanted to roll or not. "There's something else," said Council Prime residents of Harmony, their musical voice carrying new depths of sadness. The memorial proposals for human military personnel killed defending non-human worlds. Every member species has requested permission to build monuments, name star systems, establish educational foundations. No. Jin-Ho's voice was quiet but firm. Our people didn't die for gratitude. They died because it was necessary. War Prime Thundering Blade leaned forward in his seat. "Then what do you want from us? What does humanity require as payment for your sacrifice?" Jin-Ho looked around the chamber at beings she had come to love despite everything. Species that had shown her the possibility of civilization without violence. The dream of a galaxy where disputes were solved through wisdom rather than war. They were diminished now, no longer innocent of the universe's true nature, but still precious in their commitment to principles she wished humanity could share. "What we want," she said slowly, "is what we've always wanted: to learn from your wisdom, to grow beyond our violent nature, to become worthy of the peace you've built." She paused, feeling a way to command decisions that saved billions but cost millions. "What we require is your understanding that someone must always stand guard. Someone must be willing to make the hard choices, to bear the moral burden of necessary violence, so that others can remain pure." She opened the charter and signed it with movements that seemed to age her visibly. Humanity accepts the role of guardian species, protectors of Galactic Council territories and member civilizations. We will maintain the military forces required to defend against threats to existence. We will make the decisions that others cannot make, take the actions that others cannot take. The document was passed among the delegates, each signature recognition of a new reality. The galaxy would remain peaceful and civilized, but that peace would always rest on the foundation of human willingness to embrace violence in its defense. As the session ended and delegates filed out in their usual orderly fashion, Elder Crystal Song of Ages approached Jin-Ho with steps that seemed carved from sorrow. "Do you hate us?" the Altarian asked quietly. "For what we have made you become." Jin-Ho considered the question. Looking out through the chamber's great windows at a star field now patrolled by human warships, vessels designed for the specific purpose of committing acts that civilized beings couldn't stomach. "No," she said finally, "we don't hate you. We love you. That's why we're willing to be what you cannot be." Years later, when human children asked why their fleet stood eternal watch over peaceful worlds, why their people alone bore the burden of galactic defense, they were told the truth, that the greatest act of civilization was not the absence of violence, but the willingness of some to bear that violence so others never had to. The stars remained bright and peaceful, guarded by the dark ships of those who chose to walk in shadow, so others could live in light.